learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about benefit finding and benefit reminding, learn that there can be benefits from crisis, identify the individual differences in benefit finding, and evaluate various longitudinal studies in this area. Introduction. The discovery of benefits from living with adversity has been found in numerous investigations. This is pivotal to several prominent theories of cognitive adaptation to threat and can be predicted by personality differences. This module summarizes the prevalence and adaptive significance of finding benefits from adverse events, locates the place of benefit finding in stress and coping theories, and examines how benefit findings may be adapted or shaped by specific psychological dispositions such as optimism and hope, and by broader personality traits such as extraversion and openness to experience. The distinction between beliefs about benefits from adversity, benefit finding, and the use of such knowledge as a deliberate strategy of coping with the problem, that is, benefit reminding, is underscored and illustrated by the research on coping with chronic pain. Theorists like Tedeschi and Colhorn have proposed a central role for benefit findings as a meaning-making process in adapting to negatively life events. They have discussed benefit finding in the context of post-traumatic growth. Gillis and Niemeyer posited benefit finding as one of the three meaning reconstruction process in response to significant loss, and Park and Folkman conceptualizes benefit findings as a cognitive reappraisal coping strategy, which belongs to the meaning-based category of coping processes. Individuals focusing adversely have often been found to report benefits in their negative experiences. Benefit findings plays a prominent role in theories of cognitive adaptation to threatening circumstances and is related to psychological and physical health, post-traumatic growth, and psychological thriving. Snyder and McCulloch refers to benefit findings as a human strength.
Longitudinal studies. Victims of fire. In the first published longitudinal study of finding benefits in adversity, Thompson, 1985, surveyed individuals whose apartments had been partially or completely destroyed by fire. This study provided the first evidence that benefit finding might predict later mood, pleasure in the daily activities, and psychological symptoms. Two-thirds of the sample reported finding some benefit in the experience, mostly citing the helpfulness of others and important life lessons learned. It was found that the composite indicator of cognitive adaptation 1 to 2 weeks after the fire predicted well-being a year later. Bereaved individuals. In a prospective study, Davis, Nolan, Hoeksma, and Larson 1998 studied individuals whose parent, spouse, partner, child, or sibling was in a hospital care. 73% reported that they had found something positive in the experience, including personal growth, new life perspective, strengthening family bonds, and support from others. Mothers of acutely ill newborns. Affleck, Tennant, and Rowe studied mothers whose infants were in a neonatal intensive care unit. They asked the participants whether they had found any benefits from this experience. 75% of these mothers stated at least one benefit, such as improved relationships with family and friends, the importance of keeping life's problems in perspective, increased empathy, positive changes in personality, and the fact that their child was now even more precious to them. It was found that mothers who cited benefits during their infant's hospitalization reported brighter mood and less distress 6 and 18 months later. Men who experienced a first heart attack. A long term study of men who survived a first heart attack was carried out. Affleck, Tennant, Krog, and Levine. 7 weeks after their initial heart attack, 58% of these men cited benefits such as anticipated changes in lifestyle, increased enjoyment, valued lessons about the importance of health behavior, and positive changes in their values and life philosophies. It was found that those who cited benefits were in better cardiac health and were less likely to have suffered another attack. Disaster victims Macmillan, Smith, and Fisher carried out a longitudinal study of people who had experienced one of three disasters involving extensive property damage and loss of life: a severe tornado, a plane crashing into a hotel lobby, or a mass shooting. Participants who reported benefits soon after experiencing one of these adverse events were less likely to evidence extreme distress 3 years later. The perceived benefit moderated the effect of severity of exposure on mental health change. Participants with high exposure who perceived some benefit had the greatest recovery, that is, change in the number of diagnoses, whereas those with high exposure who did not perceive benefit had the least recovery. Bereaved HIV, seropositive men. In a recent study of AIDS related mortality among bereaved HIV seropositive men, Bauer et al. Examined both physiological and behavioral mediators. They found a somewhat lower incidence of benefit finding than was reported in other studies of benefit finding, like greater appreciation for loved ones, a perception of life as precious, increased self understanding, and enhanced interpersonal functioning. Bauer et al. Found that benefit finding, which they referred as the discovery of meaning, anticipated CD40 lymphocyte decline, benefit finding was associated with a lower rate of AIDS related mortality over the next 4 to 9 years. Rheumatoid arthritis patients. In a study of individuals experiencing chronic pain, Tenney, Affleck, Arose, Higgins, and Mendola assessed benefit finding among rheumatoid arthritis patients before they completed a diary of daily pain, mood, and pain related activity limitations each evening for 75 days. They found that perceived benefits moderated the relationship between pain severity and activity limitations. In a study of women With fibromyalgia, Affleck and Tenon, a chronic pain syndrome with unknown etiology, researchers examined the deliberate daily use of benefit cognitions, which they called benefit reminding, and used a self monitoring methodology to determine how benefit reminding unfolds day to day. Rheumatoid arthritis patients. The self monitoring methodology used in this study involved combination of a nightly structured diary and a computer assisted real time assessment of pain intensity and mood several times each day. The average respondent reported benefit reminding on 24 of the 30 study days, although 33 of our 89 patients never reminded themselves of benefit. It was discovered that days characterized by more benefit reminding did not differ in pain intensity, but they were accompanied by improved mood, specifically increased levels of pleasant, aroused, and aroused pleasant mood, emotional symptom reduction, fewer psychiatric syndromes, a reduced risk for adverse medical outcomes, and decreased mortality. Benefit finding appears to be common among individuals facing a myriad of threatening events like cancer, and it predicts emotional and physical adaptation months or years later. Assumptions. The original assumption among theorists was that victims' reports of benefits from a form of denial or a maladaptive reality distortion. This assumption has been supplanted in current theoretical formulations by three other assumptions reflecting the view that benefit finding as a selective evaluation, benefit finding as a coping strategy, benefit finding emerges later in the adjustment process, benefit finding as a selective evaluation. According to Taylor et al., selective evaluation process minimizes victimization by focusing on beneficial qualities of the situation. Other selective evaluations include finding a sense of order and purpose in the threatening experience, imagining worse worlds, and making comparisons with less fortunate others. These appraisals help individuals restore valued assumptions and cherished beliefs about themselves as relatively invulnerable and their world as predictable, meaningful, and benevolent. Benefit finding as a coping strategy. Searching for evidence of benefits and taking the time to remind oneself of these perceived benefits is coping. Lazarus and Folkman included perceived benefits as an indicator of emotion focused coping. The ways of coping scale, for example, includes the following items: changed or grew as a person in a good way, came out of the experience better than when I went in, found new faith, and discovered what is important in life. Hence, there is confusion between benefit finding as a coping strategy and benefit finding as a conclusion. Benefit finding emerges later in the adjustment. The distinction between sense making, that is, making sense of adversity within one's existing worldview, and benefit finding assumes that benefit finding emerges relatively late in the process of adapting to adversity. It has been argued that if sense making is going to emerge from a negative event, it should do so within several months of the event. Wortman, Silver, and Kessler, and that individuals who adapt successfully to a threatening event first make sense of the event and only later find benefit from the experience. Jenoff, Blumen, and Franz. Park suggested that over time, individuals come to alter the perceived value of a traumatic experience. Teshy and Calhoun state that benefits such as sense of personal strength and perceived growth emerge rather than late in the process of adapting to adversity. There is little empirical support for the three major assumptions guiding current theory and research on benefit finding in the aftermath of a negative life event. Although finding benefits may for some individuals reflect a selective evaluation, there is no evidence that participants in the studies were making selective evaluations. Similarly, while benefit finding can be a coping strategy, rarely has it been measured in a way that would warrant such an inference. Finally, the assumption that benefit finding emerges relatively late in the process of adapting to a major loss or threatening event is supported neither in cross sectional nor in longitudinal studies. Rather, benefits appear to be found within weeks of the event and retained for many years. Moreover, in the longitudinal studies presented earlier, there is no strong support for the assumption that benefit finding emerges late in the adjustment process. Thomson, 1985, found that victims of a fire showed no change in their perception of benefits over the course of a year. Testable alternatives. Benefit finding as a personality characteristic. Negative life events provide an opportunity for people to recreate their life narratives and structure a life story with meaning. There are individuals who provide narratives in which misfortune or a tragedy contains a positive aspect. Such people also describe episodes in which adversity ultimately leads to some personal gain or benefit. Benefit finding as a reflection of growth or change. An emerging literature on post traumatic growth, Tedeschi and Calhoun, 1995, and Thriving Appel, looks at benefits not as a cognitive construction designed to protect threatened assumptions, but as an indicator of genuine positive change. Benefit finding as an explanation of one's temperament. Extroverts who feel relatively happy, regardless of their circumstances, may find themselves feeling happy despite a recent life crisis. They are more likely to offer appreciation of the little things in life and sense of gratitude. In doing so, they provide a satisfying explanation for their temperament. Perceived benefits and implicit theories of consistency and change. An individual who is facing adversity in order to determine that her self concept, relationships with others, or life priorities have changed in a positive way must compare his or her current standing on these dimensions with his/her former self. According to the implicit theories model, an individual who has actually declined in a particular life domain following a threatening event is unlikely to report benefits in that domain. Thus, people who have had notable declines in their self concepts, relationships with social networks, and life priorities, the three most consistently reported domains in which benefits have been reported, Abdegraf and Taylor, are most likely to report high levels of negative effect than their counterparts. Ross asserts that the recollection of personal attributes at a previous time involves two steps. First, the individual notes his or her present status on the attribute. He or she then uses an implicit theory of stability or change to guide a construction of the past. When relevant information cannot be recalled, the individual uses his or her implicit theory and present status on the relevant attribute to create a plausible past. Beleza and Bauer. Ross found that people's theories may lead them to experience more change than has actually occurred. In the current models of adaptation to adversity, benefit finding is interpreted as a motivated construction of the present, whereas the implicit theory approach views benefit finding as a byproduct of the dispassionate reconstruction of the past. Ross. It predicts that exaggeration of positive change should occur when a person's theory of change leads him or her to anticipate such change when little or no change has actually occurred. Not everyone who experiences adversity cites benefits. The implicit theories approach acknowledges individual differences in the perception of positive change, and Ross offers several situational factors that should produce a negative bias in the recollection of one's personal history and thus the perception that the present is more positive than the past. Benefit finding as a temporal comparison. As Clore, Ferring, and Philip note, a central tenet of temporal comparison theory posits that although individuals are inclined to evaluate the self as stable, when efforts to reduce negative discrepancies between the past and the present are unsuccessful, they will then construct positive changes, including subjective evidence of maturation, progress, and growth. King and Minner found that, compared with control subjects, college students who wrote about the benefit they experienced from a negative life event had fewer health center visits over the next 5 months. Similarly, Stanton et al. Reported that women who wrote about positive thoughts and feelings regarding their ongoing experience with breast cancer had fewer medical appointments for cancer related morbidities than did women in a control group. Studies have linked benefit finding to trait optimism, trait hope, trait extraversion, and internal locus of control. Tenen and Affleck raised concern about the effect of optimism because a reanalysis of one study suggested that the effect of optimism may have been an artifact of items in the optimism scale that themselves reflect benefit finding. In non-patient samples, benefit finding has been related to perceived control after sexual assault, Fraser 2003, and to trait agreeableness after relationship breakup, Teixeira and Fraser. Benefit finding has again been related to optimism following bereavement, Davis et al., and also to religiousness, Park et al. Links have also been found between benefit finding and both approach coping and religious coping after sexual assault, Fraser, and for acceptance, religious coping, and positive reframing after diverse stressors, Park et al. Helgeson et al. Found that benefit finding related to an index of personal resources that included good body image, self esteem, personal control, and low illness uncertainty. Sears et al. Found a link between optimism and some measure of benefit, but not others. Lechner et al. Tested the relation of neuroticism to benefit finding but found none. There is also evidence that fighting spirit coping relates to greater benefit finding, but that avoidance coping does not. Reported findings fall within three categories: perceptions of the self as stronger, closer relationships, and greater clarity regarding what is really important in life. Changes in appraisal processes, coping strategies and resources, interpersonal relationships and goals, and priorities may serve as psychological pathways linking benefit finding and physical health. Theoretical and descriptive accounts of benefit finding suggest that changes in these four domains are commonly reported after stressful life experiences. Deci and Calhoun. Positive affect may serve as another psychological pathway linking benefit finding and health. Although positive affect is not a component of benefit finding, there is consistent evidence that benefit finding is associated with increases in positive affect. This relationship has been demonstrated in both cross sectional and longitudinal studies, suggesting that benefit finding precedes changes in positive affect and is supported by results from recent meta analysis of this literature. Helgeson, Reynolds, and Tomic, Stanton, Bauer, and Lowe. Increased positive affect may also promote the development of personal resources, Fredrickson, creating another pathway through which benefit finding may enhance health outcomes. Using positive affirmations, one can also find benefit in adverse circumstances through the use of positive affirmations, which are usually short positive statements targeted at a specific subconscious set of beliefs. They challenge and undermine negative beliefs and replace them with positive self nurturing beliefs.
Number one, the distinction between beliefs about benefits from adversity, that is, benefit finding, and the use of such knowledge as a deliberate strategy of coping with the problem, that is, benefit reminding, is made. Number two, there are some longitudinal studies based on benefit finding and benefit reminding on victims of fire, bereaved individuals, mothers of acutely ill newborns, men who experiences a first heart attack, disaster victims, bereaved HIV, stereopositive men, rheumatoid arthritis patients, etc. Number three assumptions are made reflecting the view that benefit finding A is a selective appraisal, B is a coping strategy, C emerging only later in the process of adjusting to adversity. Fourth one, some of the testable alternatives regarding benefit finding and benefit reminding, etc. Benefit finding as a personality characteristic, benefit finding as a reflection of growth or change, benefit finding as an explanation of one's temperament, perceived benefits, and implicit theories of consistency and change, benefit finding as a temporal comparison.